Good morning. Oh my gosh, such a quiet group.
Good morning.
Good morning. There's a lot of rowdiness last night, so we're welcome. It's so great to see everybody. It's kind of weird to be sitting in the corner. Sorry about that. I'm Wendy Willis. I'm the director of Oregon's Kitchen Table and one of the partners for today's PEP Talks, along with the city, and we're just very glad to be here. Through this morning, we'll take you through the agenda pretty soon, but we're first we're going to be welcomed to the space by Alicia Howard, who is Alicia in the room? Maybe I'll filibuster for a second until she gets here. I saw her just a second ago. But get coffee, get water. Maybe we'll do our welcoming activity, and then we'll have Alicia welcome us to the space. So one of the things that we heard as we were planning for this is that folks were so excited about the idea of being together in real life, and so we want to give you a chance to talk to each other and to have some fellowship. We are going to play a mix and mingle game. We played one last night, and I want you to think for 2 seconds about, I think there's cards at the front desk. Either do this in your head or do it on your card. Tell us something about Portland that delights you. And I know that for our guests from out of town, their delight is short-lived, but hopefully they can think of something. And what we'll do is, how it works is think about something that delights you. Sarah's going to turn on the music. Sarah, want to wave your hand there? And then, so stand up. When the music goes on, walk around. When it stops, pick a buddy, talk about what delights you. And then when the music goes on, you'll move around again and talk to a different person. So let's start out with some delight. So Sarah, music? So Alicia was born and raised in Northeast Portland. She's a descendant of Vanport survivors and has deep roots within the Black community in the metro area. She's a proud HBCU graduate of Fisk University in Nashville. Currently, she is the Farm to School Fellow at EcoTrust. She was a part of the inaugural cohort of the Vivian Barnett Fellowship for Food Systems Leaders. Outside of EcoTrust, she's the owner and operator of a vermicomposting, sorry, I didn't quite practice that word, vermicomposting practice called Deep Roots Worms, LLC, located at Black Futures Farms. She's a member of the Portland Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, where she also serves as second vice president and chair of program planning and development. She also serves on the board of directors for Hollow Mentors and Black Food Sovereignty Coalition. Thank you for hosting us here today, Alicia.
Of course. Can everyone hear me? Yes? Okay. Well, good morning. Again, my name is Alicia Howard. I use she, her pronouns. I would love to welcome you to the June Key Delta Community Center this morning, where Portland Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated does all of our community service work here. And we're really, really excited to have this event here this morning. It's a beautiful day. It's not raining. It's not gray. We were just talking about that. And I was speaking to someone saying it's a beautiful day and a great day to be in a building where like 80% of it is glass. So we can see across the street into Peninsula Park, which you all, I'm sure, are familiar with, is one of Portland's hallmarks. The roses aren't quite in bloom yet, but there's a lot to look forward to. So thank you for being here. I look forward to engaging in this really important conversation about the lived experiences of folks here in Portland, whether they were born here like I was, or you are a transplant. Dun, dun, dun. But thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much for having us. So we're just going to talk a little bit about what happened yesterday. So as you probably, many of you know, this is a 3-day event. Yesterday was at Zenger Farms in East Portland. Tomorrow's downtown at PSU, and today we get to be here in this this beautiful space. So I'm asked. This video is super weird, so I'm hoping we can get it down, if we can, please. Because it makes people watch television instead of watch people, because it's just so big and attractive. Thank you. So if we can, we're going to introduce the team, both so you know who's here, and so we can create a kind of collage-style version of what we learned yesterday. So we're going to do that first, introduce the team, talk about, hear what people learned yesterday, and then we'll talk about the agenda for today, and then we'll get going. So that's sort of where we are. I realized that you all probably need to be on a mic in order to be heard. So if the Organs Kitchen Table team can come forward first, and we'll do it like in teams so that you can use the mics. This is something that we did not plan for. So first we have, since she's first in line, Sarah Giles. Do you want to talk about one of your key impressions from yesterday? Introduce yourself to the group. So what?
Should I do it right here?
Do it there. But okay, team, come forward so there's not a lot of transition time. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I am a project manager with Oregon's Kitchen Table, and I have a takeaway that I'm doing some of the Zoom moderation online and then doing stuff here in the room, and I had the same takeaway 5 minutes ago, which when you're doing engagement, let people do what they want to do and don't try to interrupt them with your music and with what you want them to do, because they're already doing what you want them to do, which is mingling and talking to each other and building connection.
Good one, Sarah. Thanks. Kim?
Hey, Kim Hack Davidson, and I'm a graduate student at Portland State University supporting this event. And I had lots of key takeaways, was super inspired. I loved all the youth voices and the focus on participatory budgeting as a way for participation to be more democratic and transparent. I also thought it was super thoughtful, Engage Arlington, having a one-stop shop on the webpage for folks to know everything that's going on that they can get involved in instead of trying to sort through bureaucratic websites, which no one wants to do.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.
Megan?
Hi, I'm Megan. I'm with the Organs Kitchen Table team. And my key takeaway from yesterday was that there's no one specific style of community engagement, and that it really depends on the context you're coming from and who you're trying to engage with. So I really appreciated the 2 panels we had yesterday because it represented so many different communities and styles of engagement.
Thanks, Megan. Nusat and Damon?
Good morning, everyone. This is Nusat, and I work with Oregon Kitchen Table. And it was a wonderful experience yesterday. I learned so many things, and I appreciate everyone. What was my key takeaways? I take so many things yesterday. One thing I would say that for the community engagement, that we should embrace it openly, that everyone has a different story, that when we are applying it, make it more participatory and engaging. So we should listen to everyone, be a good listener. That is always helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Nusat.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Damon Isaiah Turner. I'm a project consultant with Oregon's Kitchen Table. One of the things that really stood out to me yesterday is that Blanca Gaitin Forfan, who works with PB, Participatory Budgeting Oregon, talked about centering our humanness and human beings in regard to community engagement. And just never forgetting that, ensuring that when municipalities engage with communities, when communities engage with each other, community-based organizations, ensuring that that's what we're centering, the humanness within us all. And what, in the end, as a result, what are the impacts of what we're deciding in that community engagement process? So just kind of something for us to always kind of really think about, make sure that that is what we are centering in whatever we do.
Thanks, Damon.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Diane O'Day, and I am supporting this event as a note taker. I will say that my primary takeaway from yesterday, and something that I've been reflecting on a lot, is the importance of embracing the power of your own experience, and realizing, really embracing the fact that your experience is your expertise.
Thanks, Diane.
Hello, I'm Neil Simon, also helping out with notes. And I think the big thing for me yesterday was hearing from some of the panelists of the younger speakers about, if we're going to engage, we need people to know that not they're just going to be heard, but they're actually going to have some impact on the process that they're being engaged on. And that sense that if you're going to ask me my opinion, you're not going to really use it, or I'm not going to see it reflected back to me in the end product, then why did I participate? So that kind of existential question of engagement.
Thanks, Neil. And we know as a community-based organization at Portland State, we're not supposed to pick favorites, but one of our secrets is that our partners from the city are some of our favorites. So Perla, Perla and Shelby are like our big favorites. And so,
thank you for that, and welcome everybody. I'm so excited to be here for day 2 of PEP Talk. I had so many takeaways yesterday, but I think one that I'm going to put in my back pocket as a mantra is, don't wait to engage when there's just a problem. Like, build the engagement, build the relationship, and so that when there is a problem or there's an issue that you want to solve, you already have that trust and that partnership. I really loved that.
Great. Thanks, Perla. Shelby?
Hello, everybody. Shelby Williams with Office of Community and Civic Life. At Zenger Farm yesterday, one of the things that was a really big takeaway from me was just how much fun and energizing it was to be out in a community space where there were other community activities going on. They had their kids program going on, their farming activities, and it was so much fun, so amazing to see all that vibrancy and that life, and be out in the community space and be able to be a part of it and work with it, in it. And so that's one of the reasons that we selected different locations around the city. We really want to take this opportunity to go out into community and have those moments in these spaces. So thank you to June Key Delta Community Center for having us.
Thank you, Shelby. And for those of you who were there yesterday, share with folks who weren't. So throughout the day, we'll have a chance to be together and talk. And so, one of the things that we hope for is that you'll get a chance to do that. So I forgot to tell my key takeaway. I actually had a key takeaway that was like kind of technocratic, and I'm just going to throw it away. Because I think my real key takeaway was, listening to a couple of folks talking about feeling othered as young people and feeling like they didn't belong, and that more like when they felt like they were in a more democratic space, that real democracy is healing, and it has a lot of emotional nourishment to it, and it just felt so real to me, and I just want to do that. So so if we can try to do that for each other today, I really hope we can. So quickly, what's going to happen? What we're going to do besides have fun and take care of each other is first we're going to hear. I think many of you know we have some really experienced, wise visitors who have come to Portland to be with us and to sort of like create, I always think of us like kind of create an estuary space. So there's like the ocean and the river have come together, the Portland experiences and the experiences from around the country and around the world. We'll get to hear some things from them, from our visitors, and then we'll have some more folks from Portland to talk about their experiences, do some storytelling about their experiences in the city. And then of course we eat, because what would we do if we didn't? And so we'll get to fellowship and eat a little bit. Delicious food from Mississippi chefs for lunch, and then we'll do some work together to workshop some ideas. So use this kind of super enriched space to go, what's the thing that's exciting to us, and work on those things together. And then we'll get to have a community lunch, visit with each other, talk to some of the folks that you've heard connections with, and then go enjoy the sunshine on Friday afternoon. So that's kind of how we're going to proceed. Are the community agreement slides available? We're like, married people. We just yell at each other from the other room. The community agreements were added to yesterday, so we're just going to put them up quickly. And instead of spending an hour developing community agreements together, we thought we would just say, here's some suggestions. Tell us if you either can't live with one of them or you want to add another one. So here they are. Bring your full attention, which people have already, which I really appreciate. Thank you. As Sarah says, people are participating fully. Listen to learn, share generously. And I know that I have to, there are practices that I have to engage in to do that myself. So do what you need to do that. If you have a question, ask it, because probably other people do too. But please do it on the mic so that we're not leaving out our friends online. Be mindful of your impact, not just your intent. So take a breath before you speak if you can. Take care of your own needs, support others in doing the same. So we're really kind of not really taking breaks until lunch. So stand up, stretch, drink water, do what you need to do. And then don't leave others behind. This is a strange meeting, right? That's a rolling meeting where the list of attendees, some people have been here all the time, some people have been here part of the time. So if we need to catch each other up, let's do that. Seek connection, which I already see happening. Offer appreciations freely. Bring joy, seek joy. And seek compromise. Are there any of those that this community can't live with, anybody in this community can't live with? And what about, are there additions you'd like to see to this? And I guess if there's anybody online who wants to add, they can do so.
I'm monitoring that.
Okay, thanks, Shelby. All right, I guess we're ready to go. So I would ask that our visitors join us at the table, and we'll transition to that conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back.
This is when we sing the good morning song?
Yes, you do. You can do whatever you want. Dance. So these folks, we worked them hard until 9 o'clock last night, and so we're grateful to everybody coming back to and being with us at Junkie Delta. Thanks, Roz. I guess I'm going to just ask first that you introduce yourself to this group and a sentence or two about what you do when you're not here with us in Portland, and a key takeaway that you had, sort of in the spirit that we just heard offered by the other sponsors of the event. So
just one key takeaway?
No, it doesn't have to be one. It could be two. So you're going to get a chance to talk more than once. Are you starting, Brenna?
I guess I am, since I'm the shortest, so I get to start. Good morning. It's just a delight to be in Portland, Oregon. Here from Arlington County, Virginia. I did introduce myself yesterday, but for those of you who are new to the group, I lead all the communication engagement work. I'm a member of the cabinet in Arlington, the senior leadership team, and we've really been working. We're very much on a journey, as you are, to in continuous improvement. To do better in our engagement practice and to weave communication engagement together with the policy planning, program, and project work that we do day to day. And so that's just a little bit about me. And relative to, I was capturing quotes yesterday, so I just want to share a couple sound bites. But time, process, patience, and persistence are a must. Public engagement can originate at the grassroots. It's a two-way street. It's a value exchange. Might be one of my favorites. If process is designed not to include, then it excludes. So,
yeah. Thanks, Brenna.
All right. So I'm Julia Carboni. I am currently a professor at the Maxwell School at Syracuse University, where I direct a program called Citizenship and Civic Engagement, where we teach students how to do engagement work, basically, and to do it ethically. I'm also research director for collaborative governance for a research institute there. And starting July 1, I will be the director of the Ruckelshaus Center in Seattle, which is a partnership between Washington State and the University of Washington to support collaborative policymaking and public engagement in the Pacific Northwest and beyond. My engagement work is largely centered on food systems, so I want to connect with you. I know, I want to say it out loud, make sure I catch you. Where I co-founded the Indie Food Council in Indianapolis, which is I think it's the 14th largest city still. This was a grassroots effort that is now permanently housed in the mayor's office that supports collaborative engagement and food system work. And then I've also been a part of the Syracuse Onondaga Food System Alliance, which is also a food policy council that is centered on food sovereignty, food justice, and racial and social justice in central New York. Let's see, my takeaways from yesterday. My favorite takeaway was really just this idea of storytelling as being a part of engagement. And so often we bring people into spaces and we ask them to engage, but we don't give them the space to tell their story. One of the things that I've found is that hearing people's story kind of gives you a sense of where they're coming from and what they might be looking to get out of engagement. And so hearing the stories in particular of Portlanders was just phenomenal because I think, your context and lived experience often shapes the way that you engage. And it's important to know why people are at the table. I also, thought the East Portland Action Plan that was talked about yesterday seemed like a model for collaboration. And so I was super excited to hear about that. And then the sound bite that I wrote down I had under cool terms and insights, patient persistence. And I think that is a really good sort of capture of what this engagement work looks like. A lot of times we want things right now, right away, but we're moving against bureaucratic processes. And also, engagement is like herding cats, and it takes some time, but once you get the cats herded, things tend to move a little bit quickly. But that patient persistence is really important at the beginning. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Julia.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Wilkes. For Alicia, a quick remark: my wife is an AKA, but there's a deep harmony of sisterhood and service that's in the space. Just had to say that. I work for an organization called Generation Citizen, which is a national civic education organization that's committed to political education in schools so that folks can learn how the public policy process works by getting directly involved in it. And shared a little bit about that yesterday and am encouraged by the incredible strides that Oregon has made with respect to civic education through some of the bills that you all have passed, in particular SB 513 in the legislative session of 2021. Like my colleagues up here, was really impressed by a number of things. I wrote down about 10 of them, so I wouldn't repeat them. So the three that I'll share super quickly. First, the importance of skill building and cultivating democratic capacity. We heard from participatory budgeting in Oregon, the importance of working with young folks to make sure they feel confident in advocating in their own voice, sharing their stories, running legislative meetings, and crafting and leading an agenda. The second thing I thought was really powerful was the composition of folks that we heard from. It was an age-diverse panel, and generational equity, I think, spans throughout the civic engagement life cycle and is an under-named, under-leveraged resource for building durable implementation power. Once you get the thing passed, the thing on the books, you need a diverse cohort to keep the train humming along. And then lastly, heard a really powerful point that I believe Blanca made from Participatory Budgeting Oregon about going the extra mile to decode jargon and to make sure that explanations of how processes and procedures work is laid out to the point of mutual understanding, which I think has implications both for communication, but also listening and testing for understanding.
Thanks, Andrew. Felipe?
Hi, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Such a wonderful day. My name is Felipe Rey. I live in Bogota, where I was born, in Colombia. and I am a professor of constitutional law in a university called Universidad Javeriana in Bogota, and I am also founder of an organization in Colombia that works in the country but also in other places of Latin America that is called IDEMOS. IDEMOS is worried about deliberative democracy. How can we reshape our deliberative institutions to actually improve dialogue and reduce polarization in a country that badly needs that, I think. Well, everywhere in the world that is needed, maybe. I have had a lot of learnings, Wendy, from yesterday. I've learned a lot. I would like to share something that I've been thinking about, and it is that we could think about engagement as something very complicated, as a science in its own, but it's more simple than that. What I think and what I have learned is that engagement is all about humanity. The things that we expect from people in personal relationships is the kind of things that we expect from the administration, for example, or from public policy, or from policymakers. I would like to give some examples that I've heard. For example, not wait until there is a problem. That it's something that you could apply also to human relationships. You shouldn't wait to talk, for example, until you have a problem. It's important to build relationships before. It's important the same for public engagement. Be aware, I like the one of our rules, Wendy, not just your intent, but also your impact. That's important in all human relationships. Don't other people because they might be feeling othered, as it happens in human relationships. And something very beautiful that I learned yesterday is that democratic spaces have the power to heal. So democratic spaces are not just places where we talk, where we exchange arguments. Democratic spaces are also places where we heal and we are able to transform our feelings. And that's very, very important. That's what I've learned.
Thanks, Felipe. I have one thing I forgot to say because I got so excited was there are question cards on your table. If you have questions, if you want to come up here and use this mic, you absolutely can. But we were using question cards yesterday just so people didn't have to walk around. And so I think some OKT staff would grab your questions so that we can read them into the mic for the folks that are online. And online also can ask questions of this group. But and I'm sure you have things to say to each other, but I just wanted to follow up with Felipe for 1 second on this question of relationships and healing. I listened to an educator on the radio as I was coming in today who was talking about how eroded relationships are in his college classrooms because of the pandemic. He was talking about students who, they were sophomores in high school when the pandemic happened, and they're just sort of almost immobilized by having to be in relationship all the time and not coming to class so they can just do things online. So I'm curious about what any of you think about how to rebuild some of that capacity that Andrew was talking about as we're moving into this next era. Yeah.
So I am right now, or just finished teaching undergraduates. And so these are students who are sophomores. Their senior year in high school was COVID. They're super, super anxious, right? Like a lot of people are. And one of the things that I've done in that class and in other spaces with students is to create some space for them to talk about being anxious. And, with the acknowledgement, I'm not a therapist, but we should address this collective trauma that we've been through, worldwide. And one of the things that's been notable that I've heard back from students is that a lot of people aren't doing that, right? They're just let's forge ahead. It's back to business as usual. And we don't need to talk about the pandemic, even though maybe you lost somebody or, lots of bad things happened. And so related to engagement and relationship building, I think providing space for people to connect on something that is not just the topic at hand, but allowing them to engage in their humanity and say, I'm not doing okay today, or whatever it is, but to acknowledge that there's been a trauma and that we don't have to push through that, and that we can, spend some time and space just being people and not always have to have on sort of our professional faces because we're whole humans. I think that's really important. And, there's this push and we sometimes lose that in the attempt to get back to normal.
Thanks. And that relates to the patient's question, right? I mean, that those things start to circle around each other, that it takes time, that these relationships take time. Yeah. Thanks. Andrew?
The other thing that I'd note that I noticed yesterday, and that I think is important just generally for public engagement, sometimes I think there's a tendency to want to over tilt in the direction of complete command of the issues at hand, to have super deft, comprehensive analysis. And certainly research is important, studying the issues are key. But we also heard yesterday the importance of having public engagement processes evoke fun. And then secondly, there's something about political emotion that keeps us at the table. So we also heard about patience, being able to voice anger, frustration, as well as hope, and the aspects of future that invigorate a sense of possibility. Those emotions are not things that should be excluded from the public square, but should be curated and brought to the public square because they keep us in the game.
Yeah, thank you. Brenna? Felipe, do you have anything you want to add to that? Okay.
No.
Yeah.
No.
I do have a question. This patience and persistence. So Linda Robinson, who many of you may know, who's an East Portland activist, she started out as an activist when East Portland was annexed into the city. So that's a good long while ago. She's the one who sort of raised this patience and persistence. And the question that I have is, like, this is an art, not a science, right? So how do you tell what's patient and persistent and what's just head knocking? Like, how do you know when something really needs to change, or that you're just in it and you need to stay in it? I'm confused by that.
Well, I mean, I think there's a healthy push-pull between government, working government, and the public, right?
Yeah.
It's a healthy push-pull, right? Everyone brings something to the table, and some processes go faster than some people would like, and some processes go slower than some people would like. And so it's kind of like constantly threading the needle to make sure that, and I think somebody talked about this on the Portlanders panel yesterday, about the importance of, recognizing, I mean, in Arlington, we take years sometimes to do things, right? And then other people are like, why can't you get it done fast enough? So it's interesting, during COVID, we were able to innovate on things that, pre-COVID, we were like, we couldn't possibly do that. So I think, it gets back to being patient, like about the processes and figuring out together, how to move forward. So I don't know if that is helpful, but.
So I would echo that. I think, often we have these adversarial relationships where I want something and you want something, but we don't want to come together. But often, the root of engagement is collaboration, right? And this idea of public engagement is a hallmark of democracy. And so if we want to do it well, we have to build relationships. And so, the quote that I like, and I think I shared yesterday, is collaboration moves at the speed of trust. And so I think developing trusting relationships among multiple parties, including government actors, activists, whoever is coming to the table, allows you to have those conversations about, like, is this like something we need to be patient, or do we need to have a little bit more persistence? But being able to have that conversation, I think a lot of times people just don't build those relationships. They want to rush right into the work. And my observation, in working with groups all over the world, is that if you don't take time to build trust in relationships, you may get started on things really fast, but you're not going to go anywhere. It takes a longer time to build that trust, but once you've got it, then you can have those conversations about, like, is this a real roadblock, or is this something that's manufactured? How can we get around it? And you have a lot more creative thinking when you have a space where people are engaged and trusting each other. And so you can say, should I still be patient, or is there something I need to push here? And I think just building that relationship is really good, and not being afraid of that. And with that, sort of decentering the power of, public officials or government, bureaucrats. There's this idea that we're in command and we're in control. And I think on that side, we need to let go of that a little bit, to say that we're working collaboratively. And I may, be the government official or representative, but there is power, expertise, and knowledge in the community as well. And acknowledging that can sort of decenter some of the power structures in play.
So, Julie, can I ask just a follow up on that, and then Felipe, this issue of trust is a tricky issue, right? And so I'm especially in, we heard yesterday about broken trust and how, that there's generational broken trust in some instances, in many instances. And so what does that really look like? Like, what does that on the ground look like to build trusting relationships between the government and the community?
Yeah, so I think, it comes down to being a human. So if you think about the relationships that you build with people that you want to be in relationship with, your friends, your family, your partners, the way that you approach that is probably one with an open heart and an open mind. When they mess up, you're going to be like, okay, you messed up, but let's work through it. And I think sometimes when we get into organizational or professional settings, we leave that humanity behind and we rely so much on, I'm the expert in this, or I'm mad about that we can't hear each other. And so I think, my advice to groups is always, let's leave that at the door. The way that we value knowledge and expertise in our society is not a healthy one. And so I can walk in the room and say, I have a PhD and this many years of experience and I'm going to be in control. But if I do that, I'm going to miss a lot of things. I'm going to miss a lot of opportunities to do creative engagement, to do innovative, problem solving. But if I come in and I say, I'm here, this is what I know, I want to hear what you want to know, we can start building a relationship, because it says, I value you as a person, and I see you as a person, and that you bring your lived experience and expertise. And so the recommendation is just to come as your whole self, as a human, and don't rely on a degree or a position to be in control. And that's hard for a lot of people, right? It's hard to come in and say, I don't know everything. But if you do that, you become more approachable and you become more human. And a lot of this work is just built on relationships. So think about approaching it in a way that you would someone that you want to spend time with.
Thanks, Julia. I know Felipe and then Andrew. Yeah. And also just reminders, if you have questions, dangle them in the air or come up to his mic.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. I would add that I think that it's very important to think in some sense of efficacy in participation. So one of the things that I learned from yesterday also was, for example, in participatory budgeting, she talked about real people, for the 4 reals, for real people, for real projects with real money and in real time. I really like that. It's a sense that you're in a place where your voice is being heard and what you're going to say will be taken into account. I think that's a very, very important part. But in a more human thinking, I think that listening is crucial. As you were saying before, listening is an act of love, in the sense that we human beings cannot listen. The only decision that we can take is if we listen to the other or we listen ourselves, our internal dialogue. That's the only 2 options. Yeah. So when you decide not to listen to yourself, what I'm going to say, I am worried, I am all these things, and I am going to listen to you, I am putting you first. And that's a very important act of love. And the third thing that I would say is that in participatory engagement, I think that we have to believe in the possibility of getting to consensus, getting to agreements. Our democracy has been built in the modern era around the idea of majorities, of voting, and all these kind of things. But friends actually don't vote. Friends don't vote. When you're a friend with someone and 4 people want to do something, want to go somewhere to vacation, they talk and they do arguments. They don't vote. Families don't vote many times. So citizens sometimes don't have to vote. We don't have to vote. We can talk until we get to an agreement, to something that is reasonable for all the parties, even if it's not my first option, might not be my first option, but I think that it's reasonable to accept that. I think that that's also important.
So my next tattoo is going to say, friends don't vote. I do want to do follow-up. I know, Andrew, you're trying to get in, but Felipe, I think related to what you just said, I heard the story you told me yesterday about the Colombian Constitution was really inspirational. I think sometimes Americans say to each other, and Portlanders say to each other, we're just too polarized to do anything. And I just think it's that story you told about how the Constitution came to be was really inspirational. So would you mind sharing that?
Yes, of course. Yes, it's a beautiful story. Although it's also a sad story, because the Colombian Constitution was established in 1991. So it was a very difficult time. In 1989, 5 presidential candidates were killed by Pablo Escobar and by drug dealers. So it was a very difficult moment in the country with a lot of conflict. But after all this violence, a movement that started with young people. It was a social movement. It started in the schools, in the universities. People started to ask for a new constitution, and the constitution could be enacted after an agreement between all the parties and very different people coming from very different walks of life, including a guerrilla in that time that was, by that moment, they already signed a peace agreement with the government, M19. Actually, a member of that guerrilla is now the president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, after 30 years. So when I think about the Constitution, and that's what was our conversation yesterday, Wendy, and you asked me, how do your students see the Constitution? And I think that they see it with a lot of respect, not with the kind of respect of authority, of that comes with authority, not with that kind of respect, but with respect of admiration, that someone 30 years ago could be able, in a very difficult context, to find agreements and to give us this wonderful constitution. It's a very progressive constitution, a very interesting one. So that's something very beautiful about the possibility of having agreements, that it's something that the next generations will appreciate and will see with admiration.
Yeah, thank you. Andrew, I know you were trying to get in.
One other thing I'd add to the trust conversation in particular, and we'll use an environmental justice example. I think it's important to have a kind of a braided theory of trust. And what I mean by that is, by quick example, I worked with a number of communities to help get a waste equity bill passed in New York City. And the situation was that most of the waste in communities was concentrated in Black and brown communities in the South Bronx, in North Brooklyn, in an area where I was serving in Southeast Queens. And in order to build trust, folks not only needed to know each other, which was the first step, foundational step, but also secondly, to get access to the right kind of information and the capacity to process that information. And so I was working with congregations, but we had to bring to the picture the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance to process somewhat technical stuff about particulate matter and how that adversely affected folks in the community. And then also bring in a local labor union to talk about how folks who are working in some of the contexts that we're producing pollution, what it means like on a human level. And so to have the deep sort of trust, I think it's important to bring stakeholders to the table that can bring all of the information before us to help make the decision. And then also and I really appreciate Julia's point, a kind of embedded egalitarian approach to the technical expertise that is useful to inform the wider conversation as well.
Yeah, and if I can follow up on that, the other thing I want to say is from a practical standpoint, compensate people if they're going to be engaging, right? And go to where they are. Don't expect people to come to you because you've got an office. Syracuse University is a university that's on a hill, and it's surrounded by some pretty impoverished neighborhoods, and somebody had the not brilliant idea to convene a lot of human service organizations and bring them up to the hill where there is no parking, where they have to swipe in to get into the meeting space. It's a law school. I have to swipe in, but nobody knows that, right? So we were bringing our community partners in. We're asking them to come to us. I wasn't a part of this. I was like, no, I'm not going to be a part of this. But you're already othering them and making them feel like they don't belong in a space, right? And so go to where people are if you want to talk to them. And then the compensation piece is key, and sometimes it's just like, let me provide childcare, let me provide a meal and respect you that you came and spent your time here. And then we can have other layers. So in the Syracuse Onondaga Food System Alliance, SOFSA, we spent a lot of time in the community and we were able to secure money from the USDA to do community engagement work. And one of the sort of core principles of our work is to hire community liaisons. And these are community liaisons that know what's going on. They know what the needs in the community are. So there's a woman named Mabel. Mabel lives in public housing, and the public housing is like less than a mile from my office. She has started community gardens. She knows everything that is happening in public housing, what people want, what they need, who's in trouble. And I met Mabel, and from the advisory board, we're like, oh, you know everything that's going on, and we need that information so that we can do better food system work. So we hired her and we pay her to be a community liaison. She's very social. So she just goes around, talks to people, and here's what they need. And that provides us with some capacity to understand what's happening on the ground. But it also provides her with this role. She's retired and she's like literally just walking around talking to people all day. But we're able to compensate her for her expertise and knowledge. We have another woman that we hired as a community liaison who's been fighting for a grocery store in her neighborhood. And one of the things she said was, I've been doing this work for a long time, but now I get to get paid for it, right? I'm not just volunteering my time. And that's been really important. And she's been really important in helping us advance our equity work. But again, this is a person that doesn't have like sort of the expertise or position, but she knows what's happening and she knows who the go-to people are. And so don't be extractive, don't be transactional. It's on, groups to build relationships and also to communicate back. So I grew up in a really poor community that everything was extractive and transactional and people were always trying to get information or it was felt very transactional. But when you go and you build relationships with people and you compensate them and tell them, that you value them more than just saying, I value you, like here's a meal, something else, that goes a long way to building trust because it makes people feel included. And so in building those inclusive spaces, we also have to think about the practical elements and that we are using people's time, their expertise, and their knowledge, and that is worth something and we need to value it.
Thanks, Julia. Before you speak, I actually want to ask you a question. I'm going to try to keep you off the front page of the Washington Post, Bryna. But I do think your experience in Arlington bears some similarities to Portland. And so to the edge of your capacity to say to make those comparisons, like what have you learned in your work in Arlington that you see that connects to what you've heard about Portland so far?
Sure. Well, thanks for that question. I think that our demographics, we're smaller than Portland, but I think we have similarities in terms of, we have part of our community is uber engaged. They are at every meeting, they come to every event, they know how to find us, they know how to testify, they know how to submit letters, they know how to reach out to staff. They're really uber engaged, and I appreciate that. They're passionate advocates, and they're well connected. And we live across the river from DC, so many of them have worked for the federal government, written the federal legislation, know the rules, know the laws. So it's awesome. But then we have another segment of our community that doesn't even know why they should be engaged. They don't know, what is it that why they would come to the table. And so we are really actively every report that you ever read about engagement in Arlington calls for diversifying participation. And so we're just really working to be intentional. And I think that sounds very similar to the work here in Portland. It doesn't discount all of those good voices that are already at the table. They're really important voices. But we have a whole part of our community that we have to reach out to. So we've been really spending a lot of time on stakeholder mapping, which is a skill for staff to understand who's impacted. I mentioned yesterday who benefits, who's burdened, who's missing. How do you know, and what are you going to do about it? Using the data to support that, but also using trusted leaders to support that. Pre-COVID, we had this opportunity to work with some of our, community leaders and community organizations that were in the community, working with Black and brown people who speak Amharic, Arabic, Spanish, to set the table. We did, pre-COVID, the year before COVID, we did 4 dinners with about 100, 120 people at each dinner. And within those dinners, we, the government, brought our policymakers and our leadership teams to the table to talk about public safety, to talk about, child services, kids, activities, to talk about transportation, to talk about whatever people wanted to bring to us. And it was so powerful. And like you had said, there was dinner, we had children's activities, people got gift cards at the end of the night. And what people told us was they came for the gift card, but they left feeling more connected. Yeah. And what was really cool is from the first one to the last one, we had people coming back. Yeah. And so we are actually working to try to, through the equitable engagement model that I mentioned yesterday, recreate that on a more sustainable basis, so that we can continue that work, because it's so important. And we had, our lowest residents have the lowest incomes in our community coming to that table. They're not coming to the boardroom. They're not going to call, an elected official. They're not going to email Bryna Helfer, assistant county manager. So building those, it gets back to just reinforcing the importance of both and all. And I love that statement yesterday. If you're not designing to be inclusive, you're excluding. And so that's just going to continuously resonate for me. And so intentionality is so critical and important. So I think for me that feels like some similarities.
Thanks, Bryna. So I have a question from our friend Franklin from PSU. Hi, Franklin. Franklin himself actually is a really well-known expert on participatory budgeting around the world. And so glad to see you in person today. And so his question is, what are your views on expanding participation beyond initial stage of the project? And for instance, budgeting has different phases, right? So implementation, reporting, this is very connected to what we heard yesterday about not hearing back. So thanks for asking that. Is it important to have more engagement in those later phases? So any thoughts you might have about that?
Really great question. I think it's important to have, particularly with respect to participatory budgeting, as much multi-scalar involvement as possible. And what I mean by that is in New York City, about 10 years ago, we started with a process of participatory budgeting that begun in 4 of 51 council districts. It's now over half the council, and instead of there just being a pot of money allocated on a district basis with technical assistance going through districts, there's now the entire city council has technical assistance, and there's a larger pot of money that can be considered for citywide projects rather than just district-focused projects. But there's still that connection between the district projects and the citywide projects. And so having multiple scales and levels of interaction, I think, helps to strengthen each stage, the implementation, the scale of projects that can be considered. And it gives, I think, more of that kind of emotional nourishment and healing that Wendy was talking about, when people can see, not only do I have enough money collectively to resurface a park, but we can take on bigger capital projects, repairing schools, for instance.
Yeah, and I think, engagement, it should be at sort of every aspect of a process, because we have to think about engagement not just for a particular project or, implementation or policy development, but think about engagement as relationship building in the community. So, we want to talk about how we're going to do something, but we also want to talk about whether we did it well, and going back to people and having sort of that continuous feedback loop. And part of that is, goes back to the relationship building. But if you have relationships with community and you have good processes designed to get people's input at various levels, you're going to also build that trust and be able to get that community to mobilize when you need them to, because you're not just coming to them in crisis, and you're providing opportunities for feedback. One of the things I think we forget in public service sometimes is that we do serve the people, and that means everybody, right? And so they should have an opportunity to come and have, say what they need to say. So I think, the more engagement and involvement, the better.
Thanks, Julia. I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go, Philip.
Oh.
No, go.
No,
Go.
both of
Go.
you.
Where's Franklin?
Franklin,
Hi. All right, good to see you. Well, I about participatory budgeting, I would say 3 things. The first one is that it's important to, in participatory budgeting, to think about also participatory kind of appreciation. So it's not just about building a road or something. After the road is built, we have to put a message that says we did it together. This is a consequence of we having participated. For example, in Europe, many buildings have this letter that says this was done with funding from the European Union. And you say, oh, the European Union is useful, works. Here is the road. Well, it's the same with participation. So it would be wonderful if you have a park and we did this together. We sat down in those dates and we talked for 18 hours, and here you can see the result. That it's wonderful. The second thing is, I think that it would be very interesting, Wendy, to think in participatory budgeting with lotteries and with random selection to improve representation in the people who are participating. I think that those 2 instruments can be very interestingly combined. And the final thing that I would say is that what I think that it's most amazing about participatory budgeting is that it demonstrates the possibility of global dialogue in democratic innovation. Participatory budgeting started in Brazil and now is worldwide. So we have to learn from each other around the world. We have to see what is happening in other places in the world and learn from other places, but of course be aware also of particular contexts, of particular situations, and try to be creative in how we can do the thing that was made in Brazil now in Portland, how we can improve that mechanism. I think that participatory budgeting demonstrates that very well.
So just 2 points about maybe it's not about the participatory budgeting, but it's about the funding and the opportunities to be in the sandbox. Is sometimes the bureaucratic process gets in the way. That we make it so hard for people, organizations to receive the money, to the reporting, the paperwork, all of that, and so. We're taking a look at that now for several things we're doing, so that we can, you lower the barrier for participation. So.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Brenna. There's actually 2 more questions, and I'm going to read them, but I don't want you to answer them right now. But just to have them in your head as you're talking to folks, because we want to make sure we get our next panel on of our friends. So one of them is, what are your recommendations for resources to learn skills in consensus building? And the other was, Brenna just about answered it because we have ESP. How do you balance accountability with trust? In funding community grant making, which is kind of what you were talking about. So let's keep that in our heads as we go forward. Please join me in thanking our guests for being with us today. And they're very lovely people, as you can see. So you're going to have the whole day with them. So make sure you have get a chance to visit with folks and ask your questions up close and personal. So with that, stretch, get some water, and we're going to transition. And Damon is going to introduce our next panel.
The chairs are so heavy. Maybe like the church chairs. Yeah, it's heavy. Yes. Like our church heavy is.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming back to your second session. And thank you for coming back to our, and being a member of the community, a committed member of the community that's interested in community engagement. I'll just say that for me personally, one of the most powerful and learning aspects of this template or process of this summit has been the opportunity to learn from community engagers as far as Columbia, Syracuse, Arlington, and Brooklyn, but also to learn from community engagers who are equally brilliant, equally committed, and equally willing to engage and be innovative and engage with systems and with each other locally, yesterday and today. So continuing along that theme, we have 3 additional amazing, committed leaders in the community that have backgrounds in community engagement. So what I'm going to do is read a little bit about them, and then they're each going to share an experience for them that they, similar to yesterday, around community engagement, and perhaps a lesson that they would like for each of you to kind of have a takeaway from it. And we'll just have an open conversation, have fun. So, thank you, everyone. I want your ears to be burning because I know you, Wendy already went through your bio earlier, Alicia, but I'm gonna do it again for not everyone who was here. But Alicia Howard, the illustrious Alicia Howard, is the 2nd Vice President and Chair of Program Planning and Development for the Portland Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta and Sorority Incorporated, who owns where we're at now. So just really want to be able to honor that and respect that space in terms of the long-term ownership of this building in this community. Alicia was born and raised in Northeast Portland. She is a descendant of Vanport survivors and has deep roots within the Black community in the metro area. She is a proud HBCU graduate of Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. Currently, she is the Farm to School Fellow at EcoTrust. And Alicia was a part of the inaugural cohort of the Vivian Barnett Fellowship for Food Systems Leaders, which is a program that was created by the Black Food Sovereignty Coalition. Outside of EcoTrust, she is the owner and operator of a vermicomposting practice called Deep Roots Worms LLC, located at Black Futures Farm. She's a member of Portland Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, where she also serves as 2nd Vice President and Chair of Program Planning and Development. She also serves on the Board of Directors for Ohala Mentors and Black Food Sovereignty Coalition. Please welcome Alicia again. The illustrious Mr. Ed Washington. Mr. Washington is presently the Director of Community Outreach and Engagement for Portland State University's Office of Global Diversity and Inclusion. Mr. Washington is a former president of Portland chapter of NAACP, and he has also served as a Metro counselor. And for those who may not be from Portland, Metro is another form of local government that we have here in addition to the county and the city. He was married to Jean Washington for 39 years prior to her passing in 1998, and he has 2 sons. And just letting everyone know that short bio does not accurately depict what Mr. Washington has meant to this community. The illustrious Shatoya Bentley, who is the chair of the Ebony Collective CDC and the executive director of the Ebony Collective Coalition. Shatoya is a lifelong Oregonian that wears many hats. A mom, a nonprofit founder of 2 organizations, and an elected official. She sits on the Mount Hood Community College at-large board member position. And above all, Shatoya is a community leader and an uplifter of some of our most vulnerable populations in Oregon. Please also welcome both Mr. Washington and Shatoya. So we're just gonna open it up, and I won't wanna pick anybody first, anyone who just wants to jump in first, and about between anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes, just talk a little bit, about an experience or even a culmination of experiences that you may have engaged in around community engagement, and if there are any kind of lessons that you'd like for us to learn.
I don't know why I'm called on, probably because I'm the youngest person up here.
I was taught to defer to elders.
Mr. Washington, the late Harry Belafonte used the term chronologically gifted.
Thank you. That's great company. First off, I would like to say it's a pleasure being here. I'm so happy to be able to spend some time with you all this morning and tell you a little bit about what I do in my community engagement. But before I do that, I want to just acknowledge my wife, Jean, who passed away in 1998. Jean was a Delta, and she was very much a part of helping this house being built here. And she was a dedicated Delta. And so, Jean. There are so many avenues that I can go down with regards to community engagement. But I think that before you go down any avenue, you have to have some sense of direction where you're going. And community engagement, I look back on, and I think it really started with me when I was in the Boy Scouts. I joined the Boy Scouts when I was 12 years of age, and I think that was back in 1949. And for people who add up real fast, I'm 87 years old, I think, something like that. I know I'm in my 80s. It's 86 or 87. I'm just getting younger every day, and so, but I had the opportunity, when I was, my mom and dad separated when I was probably about 8 or 9 years of age, and there was a gentleman who headed up the Boy Scout movement here in the Portland area, Mr. George Herman Obertuffer. And he has since passed on, but my oldest brother, Raleigh, joined the Scouts, and Raleigh was the second African-American to ever reach the rank of Eagle Scout here in Portland, in Oregon, and so that was a couple of days ago, and so we all got involved in scouting, and part of that was really you were taught to help people, to help others, and so that engagement started with me working at summer camp, because I worked at Scout headquarters when I started when I was 12 years of age. I was the office boy there, and I worked an hour and a half, 4 days a week, and then I worked 4 hours on Saturday. And I remember I started out earning 25 cents an hour, and then I got a big raise to $10 every 2 weeks, and so I did that, but I got engaged because when I would go to summer camp in the summer, I was able to stay at summer camp a little bit longer than usually. Usually you go down for a week, but I was always able to finagle my way, and I would end up usually staying down there for a month, down at the Oregon Coast, Camp Meriwether, and that was just getting to deal with that community of young people was very help for me. And after that and other things in my life, after I finished high school and was preparing to go to college, I attended Mount Olivet Baptist Church. And this was during the height of the civil rights movement. And I remember talking to Reverend John Jackson, who is just an icon here in terms of civil rights and within the city of Portland. He has since passed on. But I remember one summer I asked Reverend Jackson, I said, the young people here at Mount Olivet and in our African-American neighborhood, I said, I've had a wonderful experience growing up to this point. I attended the National Boy Scouts Jamboree in 1950. We traveled all the way across the United States and camped for a week at Valley Forge in Pennsylvania. And on the way back, we stopped in Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia and Hollywood and San Francisco, the Grand Canyon, and it was just an unbelievable trip. And I told Reverend Jackson, I said, I said, so many of the young people in our community don't get a chance to go to camp. They don't get a chance to go on vacation because their families was just working hard enough, just hard to keep food on the table. And so we set up this program where I had a great seventh grade teacher that taught us a lot about Oregon history, and she made sure that we saw some of the sites like the Bonneville Dam and Mount Hood and things like that. So I said, I think we can put together a program where we could charge the kids maybe a couple of dollars and rent a bus, and we did. And so those kids got the opportunity to see many of the same things. They didn't get to Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, or the Grand Canyon, but I tell you, when you take 80 kids out on a Saturday morning and they're out all day, whether it's at the Dalles Dam or Bonneville Dam or Mount Hood or the coast, or just all of these places around here, Mary Hills Museum, and so that was very, very engaging for me. But it was also working with the community, and that really, and when I was in 7th and 8th grade, we got the chance to visit the city and the county and state, so I just had appreciation for that, and that's all community, and that is what eventually landed me at Metro as a Metro council. Of course, you have to get elected first, which I did, and I spent 10 years there. But it was all about community building. And as Damon said, Metro is a regional government. Primary responsibility is land use and transportation planning. And I'm telling you, if you ever want to deal with a community and get engaged, start doing land use and transportation planning, and you will be engaged. Sometimes you want to unengage, but you will be engaged. And so that was on that level. And then I think when I came to Portland State, I started working at Portland State, I think the same year I started at Metro, or maybe a year or so afterwards. And I just worked part-time at Portland State University. I've never worked full-time. But again, community engagement. But for some reason, my idea of community engagement is really to get engaged with the young kids first. Because if you engage the young folks first, they will carry it on. And I hope that I'm an example of that. If you do the right engagement with them, they will carry it on. But you got to be able to engage with them in a way they're honest, they're forthright, and they let you know what's on their mind. So when I got to Portland State, somebody called and said that they had some great kindergartners out in Beaverton at a school that had predominantly Hispanic kids. And they said it was a kindergarten teacher, can't think of her name right now, and she said, I just want my kids to be ready for college. It's engaging the community, but starting young. And so she says, she had called around, she couldn't find anybody to do it, so my boss came to me and she says, Mr. Washington, she says, have you ever did anything with young people? And I said, yeah, a couple of times. And I said, she said, well, this teacher wants these kids to start getting ready for college now. And so I said, well, we can figure something out. And so what I put together for them with the help of others is that we had about 5 or 6 spots at the university that we would take these kids to visit. And it advanced from the kindergartners all the way up to the high schoolers, but the kindergartners were the wonderful ones. There's nothing more satisfying if you have kids, when your kids hold your hand, and you're a symbol of strength to them. But that's engaging, and that is community engagement. And sometimes people think that you're only community engaged when you get to be my age, and I'm younger than most of you all, or your age. And that is not true. It starts when they're little, and they'll remember that. And so I just can remember taking them in and having a music teacher sit down at a piano and play classical music for them, or take them over into the very small museum we got and have them see all the bones from whales and other animals, and take them into the science department and learn about how the wind works and all those things. That's engagement. But I think that the reason I have had a little success with older people is because I really learned how to engage the community, because you have to start when they are young. Everything that we are today and everything that you all are today, if you really look back, you probably trace it back to the interests that your parents took in you and how they introduced you to other things. And that's how we get engaged. And so I'm going to stop, because I hope I was talking about what you wanted to hear about, because if you're not, I got another one. No, I'm serious.
You did just fine, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm like, well, a lot of my story is similar to Mr. Ed Washington. I guess it all started down the street at Antioch Baptist Church, is my grandparents' church. I drove past it today and I was like, ooh, bringing memories of being there and in their church house on Wednesdays. So a little bit what I didn't put in my bio is that I got my community development degree at PSU, and it was mainly because my family are lifelong servants without the recognition. They've been here since the 70s. Basically Vanport days. My grandmother's uncles were working at the shipyards, things of that nature. And basically my family literally serves people. And I was thinking like, how to not handle people's issues on an individual basis, but in a cluster, in a collective. And so I searched the web. I went to community college first. I went to Mount Hood Community College first, got my business degree, because I was thinking economics was the biggest problem here for the Black community, is how our financials are being utilized. And so I got my small business and entrepreneurship degree, and I was like, okay, I think that's one problem of a bigger problem. And we constantly in the community kept talking about we need community development and building or rebuilding. And I was like, none of us are equipped to do that though. As far as professional, not necessarily experience. We had all the experience, but not the technicalities to it. And so I went to school for community development and basically got those tools and got it for free, no loans. And then I brought that back to the community. And by doing that, I still was like, government and the people are still disconnected. how and why. And I've always been inquisitive about spaces, people, places, things. And I actually was going the land use route. So, because a lot of the power was within having access to land and who had the rights to the land and things of that nature, knowing that in some cases it was stolen, and other horrific things that I won't mention for trauma reasons, but definitely those have impacted just land use things. And that was part of the problem here with the Black community, is that we constantly was taken. Things have been taken, homes, property, like our power, our hope has been taken. And so it was like, how, why, and who had to say so to this? And so I went and I constantly was engaging with folks and saying, I want to work in government. I want to work in government. I didn't know which government, but I wanted to get more access to the archives to answer these questions that I had and bring it back to the community and say, here's where we can restore our power, our understanding of gathering collectively. And I ended up getting a job in the council area of Metro, and was one of their interns to see how Metro functioned, how it operates, and was able to work in almost every department as far as engagement. I was able to sit and watch how our housing bond was being created, how stories were being collected and gathered for basically the personal experience, got to shadow leaders who was taking that role, and also how the technical side and the stakeholder side, which is stakeholders, community, and technical, were people with the expertise, sat down and made decisions, and how that functioned. And I found that very important to bring back to the community, because that's how the community will be able to participate in these things. There's no training or no book or no experience being passed down into how to engage in these spaces. And so that's pretty much how I started my nonprofit. I'm like kind of jumpy a little bit, but that's how the nonprofit came about. But a little bit before the nonprofit, while I was working at Metro, there was a lot of urban renewal projects that were being explained and emailed through the emails that the interns were taking on, and was explaining how they were moving, but there was no Black and brown engagement in them. And so the acquisitive person that I am, I'm saying, why haven't these folks been engaged when these projects are saying we got approved for engagement, we got to, we had this engagement on this particular day, great turnout, but no kind of documentation of what a great turnout actually looked like. And so I was like, I wonder if the Black community in East County are informed, are engaged, and are participating in decision making. And so I went out and looked for those folks and asked them basically, were they informed or engaged? And they were in a brainstorming about how to engage, because again, the technicality component wasn't necessarily there, but the experience of being removed time and time again was there. And so gathering collectively around a shared interest was where it started and stopped. And so I was like, all right, so there's definitely a need here, but it's bigger than me, and how could we all gather with our expertise and experiences and storytelling, and basically slow down the process until the process is actually for us and with us in a partnership, in a union, in a relationship. Like what we like to say in engagement processes is like we're in bed together. And so not just decisions being made for us, we're making it together. And so we hosted events, we joined partnerships with the city of Gresham, hosted things called Rock the Block, and had other nonprofits and businesses come together and host like series of, well, one big event where the community came and got information about what was being built for Rockwood, the Rockwood downtown area that they were establishing, making sure that the businesses were going to be Black and Brown operated, and just the whole space will be a hub because, again, Rockwood was an area where Black and Brown folks occupied and lived, but not necessarily the resources were there. So again, this new development was coming to play, but making sure that the people who lived there to utilize it was very important. And so that was one. And then, do I have enough time for a small one too? Okay. Then after my Metro experience, I ended up being a lead engagement person for the Portland Housing Bureau's preference policy. And the preference policy was an initiative that was led by a mayor at the time to implement just housing, different forms of housing for Black folks who have been removed from North and Northeast Portland. But it wasn't a solution. Like, it was just a Band-Aid. The community feels like it's a Band-Aid, so I'm going to say it's a Band-Aid for the removal of Black folks within the interstate corridor, Emmanuel's expansion, and Memorial Coliseum. And so how people were able to get into these housing units were having preference points. The top points were 6. That's how the application and how you'll be selected for housing it wasn't a first come, first serve. It was based on the points. So 2 addresses up to 6 points will get you at the top of the list, and something called eminent domain, which you may or may not know is when your family has been forcefully removed due to a reconstruction building. Like, they want to use that space for another thing instead of you living in that space. And so like, those expansions have removed Black folks from their homes, and a lot of Black folks were homeowners, and they were working class citizens. They were mothers. The majority of the homeowners were mothers with children, were removed from these spaces. And of course, government didn't really have proper documentation for these things because they didn't want people to know what they were doing. So engaging the community was very difficult for the fact that there was harm done to them and no one took responsibility or accountability for the wrongdoing. And so being a part of the government agency did not define me as an engagement person. And I always tell people I am the community and the community is me. And when I step into engagement projects or things in that nature or my organization, you must really want to do deep engagement, meaningful, and not just intentional, impactful engagement. Because we do a lot of intentions in Portland, but not necessarily looking at the impacts of that intentionality. And so it's about the impact. What is the end goal, the end result, but what are you doing leading up to that end result? So we do the continuum of engagement, and that's where at the preference policy, I shifted a lot of how they engage as a government agency by saying that throughout the whole project, there needs to be engagement throughout, not just when you want people to sign up for housing. There needs to be engagement throughout, talking to people. How are you doing as an agency? How is the treatment in these housing units? What, as partners in sharing these spaces, how is the city doing with that? And so I brought a lot of my experience in government agencies into my nonprofits, and I actually train people. So my nonprofits literally train people to engage in these spaces, and just to uplift the things that they feel like they need in order to be a citizen in these communities, because we have been so divided and separated that we don't necessarily properly engage, or when we do and when it is time to collaborate, we really don't necessarily know how to do it because we've been removed from each other so much. And so we try to teach and uplift, not hand out.
Thank you, Shatoya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm like, wow, where do I start? How do I, follow up after all of those great conversations? I was talking to Damon a little bit earlier, mentioning that my parents live about a mile east of here. They bought their house in 1995, the middle of the 90s. A lot of us know what was happening a block from 9th Street in the 90s. They bought their house for $92,500. They still live there, thank goodness. And now I think their house is appraised somewhere upwards of $700,000, $800,000. So these are my stomping grounds. I actually went to Irvington Elementary School. Does anybody know where that is? A lot of folks are familiar with the Irvington neighborhood. They don't know that it is actually historically a Black neighborhood. My grandmother, my dad's mom, lived down the street off of 8th and Knott until she passed away in 2021. Most of my educators when I was in elementary school were Black women. So for folks that often talk about Portland being one of the whitest cities in America, for me, relatively, my childhood was very Black, very, very Black. The librarian in my elementary school was Black. Many of the other administrators were Black. I too grew up in a Baptist church off of North Gantenbein called New Hope Missionary Baptist Church. I also grew up going to a church called Mount Sinai that was pastored by my uncle, Donald Frazier, who was also a community organizer. And so this white city that people speak about, I feel like I've gotten to know as I've grown older. But I had a very Black childhood, and I'm very proud to say that. One of the reasons being that my family descended from Milner and El Dorado, Arkansas. They came here in the early 40s for work in the shipyards like many other Black families. My great-grandfather, Joe Frazier, married my great-grandmother, Cecil May Taylor Frazier. And his brother married her sister. So I believe they call that kissing cousins or something of that sort. And then they all came to Portland eventually. And so did all of their siblings. So when I say that I have deep roots in Portland, that is exactly what I mean. The notion that I might be related to people that I see everywhere is actually very true. And so I grew up, my great-grandmother lived on 11th and Klickitat. Their house actually bordered Irving Park. And so I had the privilege of walking from the school to the places in which I spent most of my time and that I was nourished by. I did not have to be bussed out to go to an adequate school. And so that is a huge part of my Portland experience, was that my family lived proximate to other family members. And so I really grew up with a village and in a neighborhood. There were libraries and proximate that I could go to. Tidal Wave bookstore is that still here? Is that still around? No. Tidal Wave bookstore was down the street. Does anybody here remember where Tidal Wave bookstore? Hostess was still on Vancouver and Williams, right down the street from Vancouver Avenue Baptist Church, where there are some other family members of mine, which is one of the oldest Black churches here in Portland that's still standing. My family also previously lived on Morris, across from Dawson Park. We are also kin to Paul and Geneva Knowles, who we found out were kin in a very strange way after years and years and years of my grandmother being friends with Geneva and saw her at a family reunion, actually. Cousin Paul is affectionately known as the Black Mayor of Portland, a really successful businessman in the Black community in the Vancouver district, what was the Vancouver and Williams Business District. And so I grew up frequenting these spaces, being welcomed, being understood, being well cared for. I also mentioned being able to ride bikes from park to park. I would ride from Alberta Park to Fabian. Then we'd ride from Fabian to Woodlawn Park. We'd go from Woodlawn to Peninsula and so on and so forth until we had to be back in the house, because I grew up you can't come back inside the house until it's dark, because we don't want you in here making a mess. So I had a really, awesome childhood in Portland. I grew up in a pretty, I had pretty diverse classrooms. I was still one of few, but I felt welcome. And so in all of my Oregonianness, also, loving to splash in puddles and jump in leaf piles and things like that as a child, which was very contrary to some of my friends now who grew up on the East Coast and even grew up in the South. Your parents rode their bikes to work. Help me understand this. Some people don't own cars. So growing up in the Pacific Northwest, but more specifically in Portland, I grew up in a community that seemed to care. I have vivid memories of circumstances where that was evident. Prior to my being at Irvington, I was nurtured at a place called Grace Collins Community Center. You all probably know that now as the Wonder Ballroom. This was a community center that my dad played basketball in with his high school friends. It was a place where many folks who weren't making a whole lot of money, who needed, childcare, were able to afford to bring their children. And so kind of going back to what Mr. Ed talked about, like being concerned with future generations, you have to start young. And now as a person who works in farm to school, and more specifically farm to early childhood and education, we see the importance of starting in early childhood. We have to really plan 20 years in advance when it comes to establishing a sense of safety and security, especially for communities of color, more specifically the Black community here in Portland, because most people are aware, but some are not aware that this was not a place that was where we were welcomed, right? Some folks are really familiar with the exclusion laws that existed for Black people in the state of Oregon. And so what does it mean for folks to still be here, living in their same communities, if they are privileged to do so, in a place that never wanted them here in the first place? What strategies have they employed as members of the community to have staying power? And sometimes without the help of the city, without the help of the county, right? Without the help of, legislators and other folks who are deciding what happens to them and for them without their own input. And so I every time I've tried to leave Portland, something has happened. Family here does keep me here as well. But also part of why I stay is because I became a Delta here. Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated is the largest sorority in the world. It is a Black public service organization. And much like you, I grew up in a family that was very committed to service. So when I learned about what Delta was and that they were centered in service and social action, it seemed like a, no-brainer, pardon the term, but like, oh, I already do that, Oh, we already serve at the Oregon Food Bank. My church does that. My community center gives out baskets on holidays. And so I wasn't a stranger to what it meant to invest in the community. Also, I grew up right down the street, knowing this place as an old gas station. And so once I became a member and really started to heed the wisdom of elders, many of who are part of our chapter here, and the vision that they had for this place, which I was included in, right? Part of it is many people will vision and imagine a world for someone other than the people that are going to be the folks actually doing the work to make that vision come to life. And in Delta, I was able to become a part of an organization that was like, yes, this is for you. So as someone who is most likely going to be the incoming property manager of this place, some 16 years after I joined the organization, but was also here while the reconstruction was happening. I got to be a part of the transformation and see it in real time, but to see, folks from all different generations be a part of that planning, be a part of the conversations about what was possible to happen here, right? Chris Poole Jones, the late Chris Poole Jones, was very instrumental in the reconstruction of this building. She had a vision, as well as obviously June Key did, about this being a space for conversations like the ones that we're having today. But had she not had capital, had she not had the strength of her own community, she would not have been able to secure this building. She would not have been able to get the buy-in from other folks to see past what was right now, right then and right now, and look towards the future. And so I feel really privileged to still be a part of these efforts, being a person from Portland. I kind of say I feel like I'm betraying my community because I live in Southeast now. Don't tell anybody. But to also still be touching all the places that Black people exist and occupy. I am on the board for HALA Mentors in the HALA School because of folks being pushed out to East County. And so we just chartered a school for Black and Indigenous youth last year in response to some of those shifts. And really, we have to start calling things what they are too. People didn't just move, they didn't just migrate, they didn't just get pushed out. This is violence. This is violence that's happening. People aren't just losing their homes. When you get pushed out of your actual physical, right, address, you're losing more than just your shelter space. Because the record shop that used to be on Killingsworth is also no longer there. And the barber shop is not there either. And those things have yet to be restored also. And so part of what the commitment is even here and now with an organization like mine is generational wealth building, entrepreneurship, but not in a way that's just chasing capitalism. That doesn't work. That doesn't work for us. We have to be future minded. We have to be strategic. We have to think about sustainability. Most industries these days are very fleeting. We saw it happen with tech in the 2010s, right? And so that's how I ended up in food systems, because everybody's got to eat. I don't know if y'all got to eat. I know I got to eat. Everybody's got to eat. And so how do we build generational wealth that exists beyond capital? That means health, access to our basic needs, like the person who we were talking about that's advocating for a healthier food option in their community. And so I'm a part of organizations also now that are doing that work to build sovereignty for Black people when it comes to food systems. It was a big deal to have Natural Grocer be where it is here up on Alberta. They wanted to put, I think, a Trader Joe's at first, and Black folks said, absolutely not, because Trader Joe's meant something different to us at that time. It meant that white folks were going to be coming into the neighborhood and taking up space that was ours. And so when we're talking about land use, when we're talking about land justice, food justice, we have to think about, again, the impact that you're talking about, development, urban development. Is it including from the genesis? Is the inclusion an afterthought? Those are the kinds of questions that I have. Who's at the table having these discussions? My friend Richard here, when we first started this event, said, where are all the Black people? They're probably working. We have to start actually acknowledging who has the space and the availability to be at these tables. And I can't remember, I'm sorry, your name, but talked about organizing things that folks can actually attend, paying them for their time, paying them for their intellectual capital. Anyone you survey, you should be paying, because it's hard to build trust on a relationship that is inherently harmful. And so until you do the work to repair what's been done, you can't move at the speed of trust. You can't move anywhere. You kind of dig in your heels and do that repair work. And so organizations like mine, I'm sure, other entities, other nonprofits, are interested in what that repair work looks like at the governmental level. And we want to see, what folks are going to do to do that repair work in a way that's not performative. I also mentioned that part of that actionable, repair work is this building is paid for, right? Mayor Hales, I believe, was responsible for helping us burn the mortgage on this place. So this not we're not just talking about it, but we're being about it, so that we could build economic wealth. The reason why this place exists is so that folks who want to rent our building can do so at an affordable rate. But we can only do that if we don't have bills and bills and bills and bills. You would be shocked at the property taxes on this place. And how, right? How could an organization of Black women who really started, doing really, again, low-level community engagement, how do you expect them to carry out their legacy without learning the language, learning the tools, knowing who to meet, right? That has to be part of what engagement is too. What is the point of entry for folks? Academicians, I'm challenging you. You gotta meet folks where they're at. I'm the first person to graduate from college in my family.
Me too.
Right? So those are the things that matter when you're talking about outreach and engagement. You certainly can't have engagement without outreach. But you can't come wanting to extract and exploit. Because again, that's where that mistrust has happened, and it has festered in the hearts and minds of a lot of folks who legitimately, have their, apprehensions about working with folks. So be clear on what your intentions are and what the impact is, but also be very clear on what your investment is, and do not go back on it. Really, really important. And I would say that for sure, because we've seen that happen before. Yeah. We've had enough of that. We've definitely had enough of that, and a lot of folks are tired. To be honest, they've been fighting to survive in their communities for a really long time. They are subject to all of the other things that are going on in everyone else's communities as well. And so, where is there space for joy? I've heard that. Celebration, play, safety, accessibility, all of those things. So, and we're all doing the work as we don't have a choice not to do that work. So for those of you who have been privileged to have careers where you get to get paid to do that, I want you to think about how it isn't a choice for many of us folks of color to strategize and to organize, right? That's our livelihood. So to continue to think about that, and be in partnership, again, in a non-hierarchical fashion as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Can I add something?
Sure.
I just want to recognize that this is like the first panel that I actually been on with Black folks who are from Portland and having different generations at the table. And that's really meaningful for me.
Thank you.
So thank you for that.
I think each of you individually and collectively have, for us, have done what the hip hop community affectionately calls dropping jewels. I really kind of want to ground us all in some of the themes that came up in this conversation as well as in the previous conversation. Mr. Washington, you talked about early exposure, learning community building, and how that impacts that in your later work, and how the importance of getting engaged with young folks, young leaders first, and how it's so key to relationship building and expanding upon that. Shatoya, you talked about how you bringing back information to the community is so important, and one of your goals is to gather collectively around shared interests. You talked about, and I'm going to borrow this, the continuum of engagement. I'm gonna attribute it to you, but I'm gonna borrow that. Alicia, you talked a lot about just how growing up, being understood, being well cared for has impacted your lens, and how you get to be a part of the planning of transformation. You talked about the harm of gentrification. You talked about generational wealth building and entrepreneurship and capital and all that word means, and not what traditionally that word means to some people. You talked about repair work. And for those in the audience, you also referenced having a relationship with Clickitat Street. I just want to reference for anyone in the room who is a Beverly Cleary fan, author, it is that Clickitat Street. Yeah. So, but I also want to just connect it to what our previous panel also talked about too. Brian had talked about stakeholder mapping. Felipe talked about participatory engagement and how it should get us to consensus, and how it was important to not other people. Andrew talked about how sometimes we have a tendency to over tilt towards conversations at hand around a political emotion. Julia, or Dr. Carboni, had talked about providing space for people to comment, not just exclusively on the topic at hand, about humanness, about how collaboration moves at the speed of trust, and the importance of to don't be extractive and to don't be transactional. And Julia also talked about how the way we value expertise in our society is not a healthy one. So that kind of brings me to our culminative point. There's a lot of themes here, but one of the things that keep coming up that I keep hearing is around, and it's really a question, and I'll kind of defer to Wendy on how we want to address that, just as an open-ended for our panel to kind of talk about, or if we want to talk about it in the next thing around breakouts. But how do we align? It's this notion of community-based expertise in contrast to what is considered professional or technical expertise. How do we align those in community engagement processes on the continuum of engagement where that's valued, where both are valued, where both are aligned, where it's not an extraction thing, but where community-based expertise is valued just as much as so-called technical expertise? Time-wise, not sure what we're dealing with, Wendy, but I think that's a really important question to address, because it keeps coming up. And if we want to maybe pose it to folks here if they want to address it, or if we want to break out to the next thing around the individual or next activity, what do you think?
I think it'd be great to hear from these folks, and then we'll transition.
Okay. Anyone want to jump on that one?
Yes, be anti-racist. Because here's the fact. I graduated from Fisk University. That's also the alma mater of W.E.B. Du Bois. He graduated from Fisk in 1888. There are highly educated Black folks with just as many credentials as many of the people sitting here in this room. But what is historically true is, even when that is true, that knowledge is still discredited, it is still dismissed, and it is undervalued, right? So for me, the alignment happens when people decide to stop being racist. They stop being prejudiced, they stop hoarding power, and thinking less of, back to that humanity, thinking less of folks with certain lived experiences, even when they have equal or even more so formal education, again, all these other technical credentials and things like that. That's my immediate answer. Hopefully that's well received and understood.
Thank you.
Yeah, to add on to that, I'm thinking of our duty to other people. I feel like our humanity as people have been slowly being removed and thinking of personal or self-interest. And so I'm thinking, piggybacking off of the don't be racist, it's more of how do you view the world? What is your personal perspective of people, places, and things? Do you look at it in a place of this is mine, or I deserve this? Because that's where a lot of the power grabbing and the entitlement plays a role in how we interact with other people in order to reach a consensus or reach a common interest. And so it's more so like, how do you view the world? And also, how do you view your spaces? Are you feeling like a conqueror? Are you feeling like partnerships, building relationships? Like, everyone has a perspective, and it's more so how do you communicate with people, and how do people communicate with you? Like, it's a lot of personal reflecting will determine how we maneuver, in my opinion.
Yes. Someone called it honoring all ways of knowing. Honoring all ways of knowing.
Thank you. Anything?
You know, this is like deja vu for me. I'm sitting here at this table with people who are considerably younger than I am, but I feel their experience as if it was mine when I moved here in 1944. Okay. They both talk about things that they talked about places where I've been, things that I've done, experience that I've had. You know, at some point, for all of us, we've got to stop it. It just, you know, I mean, this foolishness is generational. At some point, we all have to say enough. Enough. I mean, we know it's not going to change just like that, but I'm just sitting here thinking about Irvington Grade School, and I'm thinking about, I went to Irvington Grade School, and when I went to Irvington Grade School, there was probably no more than 10 African Americans in the grade school. Nobody mentioned Grant High School. I know that when I started to Grant, she went to Grant, there was, I was a freshman at Grant in 1952, and I know there are 15 African Americans, and Grant had the largest population of students in the entire city. And it wasn't a problem for me. It really was not, because the one thing that I have learned, I know how to deal with problems. And I'm not going to act a fool in dealing with problems. I was sophomore class president at Grant. I'm probably the first black to ever hold any kind of office, but it wasn't that big of a deal. I was capable of being sophomore class president, and I made the bid and I got it. And so I'm just thinking, the fact that you all are here is hope. But I guarantee you, if I had been a Metro councilor when you were there, I would have said something. But I am the only black that's ever served on the Metro Council, except for last election, another African American gentleman. And I've been away from Metro for going on 20-some years. But it's I just think that we really have to be serious about righting these wrongs. And when you get serious about righting wrongs, you're going to get slapped around. And you're going to get slapped around by people that you would think that would never even raise their hand at you. But you got to do it. It's what we're supposed to do if we consider ourselves people, all of us, of goodwill. Then you got to practice it. And you got to be prepared for the foolishness that's going to follow it when you're practicing it. So I'm going to just say this one thing. and then I'll be through. When I moved to when my family moved to Vanport in 1944, Vanport was a city that housed 40,000 people, and it was built in less than a year. And it was not raggedy. I was there. It was not a slum. I lived there. And it was not an all-black city. The Japanese were not there when we... Oh, Lord. That's my friend. So just bear with me. Nothing else. Drives me not the person. This technology drives me nuts. So I forget to turn it off. Thank you. So it was a city. It was a city that had schools, post office, shopping centers, recreation centers, 24-hour daycare nurseries. It had everything that people needed. And it was gone in the blink of an eye. And I always tell my friends today, particularly my friends who are in government, and particularly facing the housing crisis that impacts all of us, and homelessness. And I just tell my friends, I said, and they say, well, we just don't know what to do. I just tell them, hush your mouth. If you can build a city in less than a year to house 40,000 people from all over this country, don't tell me you can't fix this problem. Just don't tell me that. And I think that we need to be that strong in everything that we talk about, because people are going to always tell you, we just don't have the money for it. We just can't. The time is not good. The time is good because people are suffering so bad. So I think I've said enough. But yeah, you got to just, if you're going to be in the trenches, take out your picks and shovel, not to beat anybody up. If you had to hit them with it, go ahead and hit them. But that's not the reason why you're in the trench with the pick. But we're just facing we're facing stuff that this is too much foolishness. And really, honestly, I think most of us have had enough of it. And so let's get doing something about it. That's all. I'm sorry.
I wanted to add something. I attended the Hope Builders lunch for Habitat for Humanity on Wednesday, and Brenda Braxton was the MC.
Mm-hmm.
She mentioned that there are the same amount of black homeowners right now in the city of Portland as there were 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The same amount of black homeowners right now in 2023 as there were 100 years ago. So to answer your question again, that stuff, we can get all the education. Policy reform hasn't saved us. It hasn't, right? We've elected officials. That hasn't changed much. So figuring out what actually mobilizes people to right their wrongs and motivates folks to right their wrongs is part of the solution. Because like you said, we're tired. 100 years of strategically being displaced. Most folks, we talk about gentrification sometimes as if it has happened just now. Mm-hmm. Gentrification has happened near Emmanuel Hospital, near the I-5 corridor there, every decade for like the last 40 years. Every single decade. 50 plus years. I have elders who do not recognize where they are driving down Williams, driving down Vancouver. And some of the important work that has happened with organizations like Oregon Black Pioneers and some other organizations like that is to keep remnants of what was so that we have something to call our own. To be able to come into a whole entire community or city and have it be wiped out from under you just as quickly as it was built up is devastating. You cannot imagine the rippling effect through generations has happened, and the residue from that is still felt. And so preserving the places where folks of color feel safe is of great importance. Is of great importance. I know so many business owners right now looking for brick and mortar. People come, how come there isn't this for us? Well, it's not that we haven't tried. We've tried to have the things that we need for ourselves, but then others come in and their needs, their public interests are prioritized instead of ours. And so being very clear and not looking away from it. I wanted to say that too. Not looking away from this and pretending as if someone else other than the collective is contributing to where we are now. We cannot be in denial about that any longer. It is not anyone else but all of us that is how we got here.
Yeah, I like the fact that Mr. Ed Washington mentioned how people in power make the excuse that they don't know or it's a heavy or hardy task. And when I was in government, that was definitely a lot of my roadblocks with engagement, just simply engaging people. It was doing I don't know about the budget. I don't know about locations. I don't know about our partners, which were nonprofits that aren't culturally specific. And this is in housing. This is in land. Like, it wasn't, or we sent out a memo or we sent something on social media and not really going to where people were was very devastating to a lot of the projects that could have been not just intentional, but impactful and move things differently. Like, I went from 500 people applying for housing to almost 1,500 in the matter of just intentionality and impact and actually meeting people where they are and actually understanding the harm that was done. Like, when we do engagement here, you're not starting from zero. You actually start at a negative 100 because of the damage that government, elected officials, and also community leaders who were paid at times to steer people the wrong way or into an interest, or lead a pack of Black and brown folks into a governmental interest instead of in people interest. And so, like, a lot of things have worked against us as from, it went literally from Mr. Ed Washington having 15 Black folks into a space to it being a collective of Black community. And then it went back to, like, my generation where we were spread out. Like, only from my K through 5th grade, I had Black folks as classmates and one Black teacher. And so as I continued to go up in academics, less and less Black folks. And so it literally, generational shift went back to basically the 1950s. And so definitely it's important for people who migrate here to know the history and know from people who actually experienced it. And not just hear it, but actually understand where are you moving to, especially like with the public safety or crime rates are so-called going up when a lot of this stuff is here, and it also comes with generational removal or displacement or gentrification. Like, these are parts of moving people around. These are the consequences to it. But if you don't know engagement or understand people, you won't know that. So what you hear on the news would just be your point of information. So it's very important to understand what you're doing before actually just diving in.
Thank you. Thank you. Each of you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your hearts, your minds, and your souls with us. Thank you. Before you all take a stretch break, I just want to hand it back over to Wendy to or Nusat to kind of walk you through our next one before we're out of here. But I just want to acknowledge too, I had another question that's, I'll read it exactly as written. Thoughts on what government can do to help residents learn, quote, how the process of decision-making, end quote, works. And so maybe, I don't know if we want to take that question into the next phase and what we're doing, but please everyone stretch and grab us some coffee or something. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Wow. When do they eat their lunch? Do they eat lunch?
I think so.
It's just a quick announcement that it's a time for lunch, but what we want right now that when you are having lunch in each table, do our reflections. It's such a profound discussion since morning, and I really appreciate all the panelists of morning one and today's. Thank you so much for sharing. It's an opportunity to hear. So we really would like to know from you two that what was your reflections on this when you were having lunch, and then we'll hear from you after the lunch. Is there anything do you want me to add, Wendy? Sounds good. Okay, time to take a break.
Thank you.
If you can, we're just going to reconvene for a moment so that folks can continue to enjoy each other. But I do appreciate you all staying, given how gorgeous it is out there. We do, I know that there was a lot of visiting and fellowship and conversation during lunch. If anyone has any reflections they'd like to share, we're going to open up for just a couple minutes to offer those. But if you want to share a reflection, you need to come use a mic so our friends online do not feel left out. So if anyone has a reflection they want to share before we close, this is your opportunity. Does anyone want to reflect in any way? Or, I know, yeah, it's true. Well, so in the meantime, one of the practices that we do at Oregon's Kitchen Table is we offer appreciations before we close. I just want to appreciate all of you for being here on a absolutely beautiful day, for listening so intently. A lot of the time I was standing in the back, and so I could see people, just the amount of attention and as Felipe says, listening is an act of love, and you could just feel the love like in the room, and I just so appreciated that. I also want to appreciate Shatoya, my friend Shatoya, and Alicia for her amazing hospitality and frankness. And I want to appreciate Ed also, who may have gone, but who has just been such a I would say a guiding light to all of us, including me, and I just appreciate that so much. So Any other appreciations that folks want to offer? You don't have to. If you can use the mic, but if you don't have to, you don't have to if you don't want to. Andrew.
I really appreciate Toya's distinction between technical knowledge, stakeholder engagement, and the necessity to bridge that disconnection and explain how these processes work. That was just really cool. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. Any other appreciations to be offered before we talk about what's next? Anybody? As always, you can appreciate each other privately, not just publicly. So we encourage you to do so and just show gratitude as you leave to the folks who are running the video, running the audio, the interpreters that are hanging in there. So there's just a lot of people who have done a lot for us to be here today, and so. Let's see behind the curtain for that. So I know we've had a couple people ask just to see how all these pieces fit together. There's PEP Talks. There's other things going on with the whole project, and so Perla is going to reveal to us all about how this project fits together.
Thanks again to everyone that came today. As some of you know, the PEP Talk is part of a larger project that Civic Life has been doing for the past year and a half, which we're calling the Portland Engagement Project, thus the word PEP. In the Portland Engagement Project, we were looking at different ways that we could engage with community, people that work within the city around engagement, to really gather ideas of what we're doing well and where there's room for improvement. So we have been hosting listening sessions across Portland to gather that